Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us for our webinar today about managing your business through rapid growth. I'll just introduce myself. Andrew, if you can just go on to the next slide, please. My name's Sue Hurst, and I'm a co-founder of CFO on Call, and we started the business in 1991. And so we're celebrating 30 years in the business this year. And in that time, we've worked with literally thousands of businesses to help them to improve their profit, cash flow, business value, and work-life satisfaction of business owners. And with me today, Andrew, if you can just go on to the next slide, please, is Andrew Free. And so Andrew's got a long and proven track record with helping businesses to successfully manage growth and everything that impacts profit and cash flow in business. So Andrew's got a BA majoring in accounting and is a CPA. He's helped many businesses with their growth. And in one instance, he's going to share with us a case history of a business that went from 35 million revenue to 70 million in just 2 years, and managed that growth quite sustainably. So welcome, Andrew. If you can just go on to the next one. Just before we get started, we'll just do a bit of housekeeping. So if you have any questions, if you'd like to just type them into the chat box, and we'll answer those at the end. So why are we talking about growth today? Well, I suppose with what's been going on in the last couple of years, there's a lot of ramping up going on in business, in the business environment. So we decided it was a really good time to consider what might be some of the ramifications of business growth and how to avoid some of the unintended consequences that can occur through unplanned growth. So as I said, Andrew's been involved in some really rapid growth scenarios and learned quite a bit around the traps about what can go wrong. And so he's going to share with us what needs to be planned to avoid those stumbling blocks, and particularly cash flow squeeze. That's one of the biggest issues that we find businesses face when they embark upon growth without really good planning, and how to keep the growth on track and come out the other side in one piece. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to you, Andrew. Welcome.
Thanks, Sue. Hello, everybody. So today we're talking about managing growth in a rapidly growing cycle, how you manage your business to, as Sue said, avoid the pitfalls. So growing a business is a very normal aspiration. But how do you manage that growth so that the growing pains don't put so much pressure on the business that it all comes undone? I'm afraid that in my experience, there's no quick fix or magic solution. Managing your growth requires discipline, hard work, and following the right processes. So what are we going to be talking about today? Documenting a plan, then communicating and implementing the plan, measuring your actual results and adjusting your plan, keeping your fundamentals up to date, and I'll explain what I mean, being flexible, and then a short case study of one of those very high growth businesses I've been involved with in the past. So, kick off, document a plan, stage one. As the old saying goes, if you fail to plan, then you plan to fail. So we need to create an operational plan to achieve your growth target. The elements will vary depending on your particular business, but in this example, you would want to cover your marketing, that is determining how many leads you'll need to support your growth target, your sales, what percentage of those leads will convert into sales based upon your experience or your market investigation, your purchasing and supply, calculate what production you will need or what products you'll need to procure, and document where you will acquire the raw materials or the products for sale. Look at your logistics, figure out whether you will need to add vehicles to your fleet or find additional outsourced transport, and how much warehousing you may need for additional stock levels. Look at your staffing. Work out what staffing we needed in all areas to support the additional volume of sales, products, services, and paperwork. And then premises. Assess whether the current premises are big enough to support the increased requirements for manufacturing or inwards goods, warehousing, and offices. You may construct a plan in a different order. You determine the revenue growth you desire, then work backwards to the marketing numbers that you need to achieve the high sales. But be prepared to make a specific growth target rather than having just a vague notion of growth. Depending upon your type of business or industry, the actual components of your operational plan may be different to the ones I've used, but the goal is the same. Construct a plan that reflects your operational elements and the changes needed to achieve your overall target of growth. So here's an example of what that may look like based upon these elements I've outlined. You target growing at 5% a month. Now that's a pretty lofty target, but we are talking about rapid growth. So we start with the leads, say 1,000 leads, you know that's 10% of that will actually convert into a sale. So you've got 100 sales and your average units per sale is 50 units. So 5,000 units sold in the month. Got to look at your stock. You've got only 2,500 units of stock. You're going to sell 5,000. So you need to purchase 7,500 to keep your stock levels up to where you can supply at a minimum a month's worth of sales. Then you look at the logistics. You know you can move 500 units per truck. So to satisfy that 7,500 units you're purchasing, you need 15 inbound deliveries. Then your outbound deliveries, 100, because you've got 100 sales, 50 units, but each movement is a sale of 50 units. So 115 movements in a month. You know you need one head to support every 50 sales. So your 100 sales is 2 heads. You need a head for every 50 logistics movements. That translates again into 2 heads. And administration, you know you need 2,500, can manage 2,500 units per head of admin. So another 2 heads. So that's your 6 head. Very simplistic example in this case. And then for warehousing, you know that you need 100 square meters of warehouse to house 100 units of stock. So 5,000 units of stock mean you're going to need 5,000 square meters of warehousing space. You know you need 25 square meters of office for each head. So that means 150 square meters of premises. And then you plan it out month by month throughout the year to see exactly where you'll be month on month. And that 5% growth over a year, month on month, ends up growing your business 71% in a year. And that's rapid growth by anybody's definition. So plan it out, see what your operational plan is, and make sure you understand all the moving parts. In stage 2, do your financial plan based on your operational plan. There's a couple of things you may consider before you get to that plan. Excuse me. Exactly how you translate it out, what metrics you use, and how variable they may be. So the first thing you want to do is to translate that operational plan into a financial plan, is construct a full P&L. All the elements of that operational plan will have revenue or costs associated with it. For example, normal staff costs, plus the cost of any additional staff and the costs of recruiting them. Once you've got that in place, you need to put together a balance sheet. All the movements in the P&L will have an opposite reflection in the balance sheet. And this needs to be planned to ensure there are no unintended consequences, like breaching any requirements that your shareholders, investors, or lending institutions might have. There are ratios, which banks like to call covenants, which will need to be considered. For example, These ratios help measure your capacity to pay your current liabilities as they fall due and your ability to service your debt to the bank. So you need to construct that balance sheet in line with your P&L, in line with your operational plan to see what's going to happen as you move along. And then thirdly, probably the most important piece is get a cash flow projection in place. Ultimately, all the activity in the operational plan and the other elements of the financial plan ends up being reflected in cash flow. And there must be a plan to manage that cash flow. It is the one thing that often trips up companies in their growth plans. Everything else is tracking according to the plan, but there's a mismatch between the expenditure needed to grow the sales, grow your capacity to manage the increased activity, and the cash that's coming in. So a proper cash flow plan will reveal whether additional funding is needed in the short term, in the medium term, in the long term. And it enables you to see what is required to reach your target. So here's an example of a translation of that operational plan we had before into a P&L. So as you can see, here's everything in blue is metrics that have come out of your operational plan. Start with the units sold. Sale price is $100 per unit, $500,000 in revenue. Cost of the unit is $65. Gross margin of $175,000, about 35%. You know, you've had to pay for 1,000 leads. They cost you $5 each, so there's $5,000. Your logistics movement costs you $250 for every inbound movement and $25 for every delivery hour. So your 15 inbounds, $250 is $3,750. Your 100 outbounds at $25 is $2,500. Total logistics costs for the month just to tick over $6,000. You've got 6 heads that cost you roughly $10,000 per month per head, so there's $60,000. You've got 5,000 square metres of warehouse space at $10 a square metre, costs you $50,000. Office space at 150 square metres at $25 a square metre, another $3,750. Total premises cost at $53,750. So those expenses, your marketing leads, your logistics, your staffing, your premises, $125,000 expenses. Off your gross margin, you've made $50,000 for the month at 10% profit. Not too bad. Some of these numbers won't be realistic in your particular instance. They may be overcooked, but it's a demonstration of how you translate those operational numbers into a financial P&L. And again, you track it through month by month to see what the impact is, what it's doing to your margin, etc. So yours will look quite different to this. It'll be more detailed than this, but it gives you a sense of the kind of P&L planning you need to do as you go through growth. There are some important considerations. The documentation of the plan should not be a standalone project. So both the operational plan and the financial plan shouldn't just be imposed on the business. It should be a cooperative effort with the internal stakeholders. You need to engage your subject matter experts to ensure that all the elements within the plan are realistic and achievable. Those internal stakeholders can help you stress test the plan, and when the final version is agreed, then you've got buy-in from them. The whole team is engaged. It's important to be aspirational, but if a plan is constructed that is simply unachievable, then the most likely outcome is failure and a disheartened team. Now, I would love to give you a rollout of a balance sheet and a cash flow, but time constraints. It's a bit more complex than a P&L, but you can always contact CFO on call. We've got the expertise to help you with those sorts of elements in your plan. So then, step 2 won't be as complex from here going forward, I promise. Communicate and implement the plan. So you need to make sure that all the relevant elements of the plan are communicated to the relevant internal and external stakeholders. They don't all need to see everything, but the pieces that affect them, they need to know about. So all employees should be made aware of what is expected from them, whether it's additional lead generation, more sales, more widgets to be manufactured, more product to be procured, new suppliers to be found, more employees to pay, more invoices to issue, more cash to collect, more invoices to pay, or new funding to be obtained. There's a lot of things to be considered. Suppliers need to be forewarned. If increased supply is required, they may not be able to satisfy it. You have to look for alternative supply. There should be discussions with your third-party logistics providers and some of your overhead items in case there are constraints there. And then finally, financial institutions must be kept informed, particularly lenders, so they understand what's going on, there are no issues with the current facilities, and ensure that they are aware that additional funding may be required. Again, the specifics may vary in your situation, but the principles are the same. Some considerations you could keep in mind: positive reinforcement to the internal stakeholders, particularly employees, is always good. This helps to keep them engaged and, of course, should be included in your plan. If they're engaged in the plan and can see tangible rewards, the target you're aiming for is much more likely to succeed. Next step, measure the actual results and adjust the plan. So once the plan is agreed, it's communicated, you've implemented it, the actual activity has got to be measured against that plan on at least a monthly basis to see how it is tracking and to determine if corrective action is needed. If it looks like the plan is working, but more slowly than expected, then adjusting the plan may mean deferring additional expenditure until it's required. So just the same as you look at your P&L, your balance sheet and cash flow on a monthly basis, you should look at how you're going against your growth plan and adjusting it for what's happening in reality. So are those variances one-offs or an ongoing trend? If it's a one-off and you can manage it, no adjustment needed. If it's an ongoing trend, then you may need to adjust your growth plan to reflect that. Adjust the model where it's needed, change the assumptions if they're warranted. So for example, because you're expanding the business, the lead percentage of conversion to sales is dropping, which is quite likely to happen if you're suddenly growing a lot, then you need to adjust that. It may mean you need to buy more leads to get the sales you need to continue to grow. And repeat this cycle at least monthly. It would be extremely unusual for the actual operations to be perfectly in line with the plan, so it's crucial to measure and react. And some important considerations. Are your current reporting systems adequate for the future of the business? Does the business need to invest in better financial software? Many high growth businesses have been constrained by not having adequate systems. So not only are your systems, but are your current processes and procedures adequate for the potential size of the business? These are all particularly important considerations when you're going through very rapid growth. Next is to keep your fundamentals up to date. And what do I mean by fundamentals? Keep your paper processing done on time. Do your regular debt collection. Make sure you pay your suppliers on time. Make sure your PAYG and GST payments are made as per schedule. Keep your super payments up to date. Prepare the accounts on time. Lodge your tax returns when required. Make sure your asset requirements are fulfilled. One of the great temptations when growing a business is to prioritise the activities that promote growth and defer some of the less exciting aspects of running a business. This is what I talked about when I said you've got to be disciplined. Paperwork processing slows down, all these things get neglected and the accounts aren't kept up to date. By maintaining that discipline of keeping your normal activities up to date, that essential piece of the overall health of the business is maintained. And then the business doesn't get into serious issues with cash flow or compliance. It also means any additional funding requirements can be pursued with the best possible chance of success when you have well-maintained and up-to-date financial records and reports. Other things to consider. Is the organisational structure of the business appropriate as the business grows? The breakdown of the fundamentals often occurs when employees get overloaded with the increased requirements of the business. Periodic reviews of the structure and capabilities of the staff should be conducted. The possibility of organisational changes should be included in the planning process, and additional training and potentially mentoring should also be considered and included. Then, and probably the most important aspect of this for me is to be flexible. You know, documenting a plan is important. Implementing and communicating it is crucial. Measuring and adjusting is necessary, but the need for flexibility is absolutely key. Build flexibility in the plan and keep that mindset as it is implemented and active. So don't make long-term commitments until growth is locked in. Don't recruit permanent staff until the need is certain. Keep an open mind about funding sources, and most importantly, be flexible with the plan. So don't commit to a long-term lease on premises until you know that that growth is locked in and maintained. Now look at a short-term lease somewhere close, you know, for office space. You could look at serviced offices, but don't make commitments that could, you know, not be required if the growth isn't as you anticipate or plan it to be. Look at casual staff or short-term contract staff until you know that permanent staff requirement is absolutely certain. And be prepared to look at alternative sources of funding. Maintaining a solid relationship with your lender is very important, but don't forget to do a regular comparison to see if there may be better facilities out there available. But as I say, most importantly, be flexible with your plan. It will always need adjusting. Sometimes because some of the assumptions are too optimistic and not achievable. Sometimes because it's too conservative and you've succeeded beyond your wildest expectations. Sometimes external circumstances like COVID-19 can cause the need for a massive readjustment. So not hitting the target is not a critical issue, but not being flexible enough to adjust can cause a good plan to end in failure. Growth in and of itself is no guarantee of success, but if you manage growth correctly, then you enhance your chances of success immeasurably. So, some important considerations, excuse me. The requirement of growth needs to be considered within the long-term strategic goals of the business. Is growth always desirable? Most of the time, yes, but occasionally you need to think, is this really benefiting the business or getting us to our long-term goals? Is the growth truly increasing profit? Even if it is increasing your profits, is it diluting your margins? Not always a bad thing, but it needs to be managed and expectations managed so people don't think the business is going in the wrong direction. In some cases, it's true that the need for growth is absolutely there. A grow or die situation, depending on a competitive environment. So planning it out, making sure you've got everything in the right place and following all those steps will help you grow when you absolutely need to. In some cases, you may have conquered a niche market and want to expand. Even if you're successful, does it then make you vulnerable to a competitor who didn't previously see you as a threat? You need to look at the wider competitive environment. There may be some unanticipated growing pains. You may well grow out of the capabilities of some long-term valued employees. How you manage that will often have an impact on the success of the whole growth plan. These sort of wider considerations need to be borne in mind as you go through that whole growth plan. So they're kind of what I see as the 5 fundamental things that you need to do to ensure that you go through rapid growth and you manage it successfully. So again, it's document a plan, operational and financial, communicate and implement the plan, measure the actual results, adjust the plan, keep all the fundamentals up to date, be flexible. And now just for a very quick case study. The business in question was an inbound call center, had operations in Australia, New Zealand and England, which was quite unusual because there's a reasonably small company, 120 staff, turnover about $20 million per annum. And it was focused on inbound emergency assistance services. The opportunity for massive growth arose when two things happened simultaneously. A major Australian telco wanted to outsource their customer support line, and a major call centre operator in the United States was looking for a NASDAQ listing and wanted an international acquisition to add some cachet to their initial public offering. The Australian company was acquired by the US company, and that brought the substance and financial capacity that enabled us to close the business with the telco. The impact was that staffing increased by about 300, mainly transfers from the telco. Revenue increased by about $30 million per annum on a running rate almost instantly. There were immediate requirements to increase floor space, fit out the floor space, increase IT capacity, recruit additional staff, all in a very tight time frame. So I'd only joined the business a couple of months before all this happened as CFO. We put together a very comprehensive package covering the projection of all these events, prepared it, presented it to the existing lender to gain approval, and we got an extensive increase in our facility to fund all this activity. It was approved because the company had a great track record with the lender. We provided excellent and constant communication. We built on that successful existing relationship. We presented that detailed and comprehensive plan and any updates to it regularly. So the premises went from 1.5 to 3.5 floors. We fitted it out. We brought on the transferred staff. We implemented all the IT upgrades and expansions, and we implemented the new contract very smoothly. We hit or exceeded all our operational and financial targets. The knock-on effect of that success was that the company kept winning small contracts, increasing business, and then less than 12 months later, we won another large contract with a major directories company who wanted to outsource their customer support call centre. Same increase of 300 staff, similar increases in revenue, same fit out, floor space, etc. It was almost like doing the same thing all over again, with the added complexity it was in another state. Throughout the process, constant communication with the bank, any changes were flagged, movements in the plan were notified. Concept was to give the lender no surprises, except for good ones. Every increase in the lending facility was approved. It became a standing joke with the relationship manager. Every time I called him, he said, "How much money do you want this time?" In summary, in 2 years, on the back of those two major contracts, we went from 120 staff to 800 staff. The revenue went from 20 million to 80 million in less than 2 years. The funding was always approved. We improved all aspects of the financials, and we never had a cash flow issue. One of the interesting side stories was that due to the huge growth, partway through those 2 years, the head office of the bank wanted to move our business from a suburban hub to the CBD. We refused because our relationship with the manager was so good. He was doing an excellent job. It was beneficial to us. It was beneficial to him. And the lesson from that, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Thank you for your time. I hope you gained something out of that. And head back to you, Sue.
That's great. Thanks, Andrew. If you can just move it on to the last slide, that'd be great. So just one question, and I think it's a really good one actually, is, you know, you've mentioned it a few times, but I think it's worth just cementing again in people's minds. Why is cash flow an issue? And doesn't more sales just help you to avoid this?
You'd think so, but it's all about timing, particularly in rapid growth phase. Your sales are going up, but your collections are always going to be lagging. You're investing in more facilities, more people. There's always this process of lag as you're going through rapid growth, where expenditure's needed ahead of the sales that are being generated by that growth. So you've got to have a very detailed cash flow plan that manages all the timing differences between your expenditure. You know, you're buying stock first, you're going to have to pay your suppliers probably at the time you're making the sale. So there's at least a month's lag normally. So managing all that lag, you've got to have some working capital to start with, and those requirements keep increasing as that plan is implemented, as you keep growing. So that's why the cash flow is so critical, that you have that plan, you can see what your requirements are, and it gives you the impetus also to make sure all the things that are affecting that cash flow are being attended to, that you're paying your suppliers on time so you don't have an interruption, but also your collections efforts are structured and followed through so you don't end up with sales that are made and you don't get the cash in a reasonable period of time. You're always going to get some debt that is slow to collect, depending on how your business is structured, but you allow for that in your cash flow plan. So as long as you allow for those elements, and that's why you also measure on a regular basis, see what's actually happened, so you can adjust your plan, adjust your cash flow, and keep looking to see if there's more funding that's required.
Yeah, it's absolutely vital, isn't it? It's probably one of the biggest issues that brings businesses undone during that growth phase.
Sure is.
Okay, great answer. Thanks, Andrew. All right, well, we're just about at the time's up. So if you wouldn't mind just clicking those other 2 bullet points, Andrew. So special offer today, if you'd like to chat with a CFO about your plans for growth, and you know, just have a chat about all the things that you need to think about, and particularly getting growth funding finance, because that's one of the other real problems that we find with small businesses, is that they struggle, have all these great opportunities, but they really struggle to get the funding required to achieve the growth. So that's where the help of a CFO can make a really big difference to your outcome. So we realize there's a lot to take in from a session like today. So we'll make a recording of the webinar available to everybody afterwards to have a look through in your own time and make some notes. And so if you'd like a copy of that, if you just want to type yes into the chat box, or if you'd like to speak to a CFO, just type yes into the chat box and we'll be in touch to arrange it. So thanks everybody for joining us today. Big thanks to you, Andrew, for sharing your experience with us. It's very valuable to hear about what goes on in the real world. So,
No problem,
so thanks again, and thanks everyone, and have a great day. See you next time. Bye.